Right now, you are wearing something. You put it on this morning and you did not think about it once. It was the first decision of your day and you made it in about 4 seconds. If someone took it off you in public, you would feel something close to panic. And in most of the world, on most nights of the year, without it, you would be dead before morning. For over 1 million years, not one human being on this planet wore anything at all. And the strange part is that we can now put a date on when that changed. Roughly, within about 100,000 years. But we did not find it in the ground. Clothing rots. There is no first coat in a museum. There is no oldest shirt. We found the answer in something that is still alive today. Something that has been living on your species for 100,000 years and has never once let go. Let's start with why we needed clothes in the first place. Because that is not obvious either. Every other mammal on Earth carries its coat with it. It grows one. In autumn, it thickens. In spring, it sheds. A wolf does not have to plan for winter. A wolf is already dressed. We are the only animal on this planet that has to manufacture its own fur. And we did not always have that problem. Somewhere around 1.2 million years ago, our ancestors had already lost most of their body hair. We know this from genetics rather than from bones. The genes that control skin pigmentation had to change, because bare skin under an equatorial sun burns, and dark skin is the fix. Those changes look to be around 1.2 million years old, which means the hair was gone before that. Why lose it at all? Sweat. You have somewhere between 2 and 5 million sweat glands, and they only work properly on skin that is exposed. Fur traps heat. Bare skin dumps it. A hairless, sweating primate can keep moving through the hottest part of the day, for hours, long after every animal it is chasing has been forced into the shade. That is the trade. We gave up our coat and bought the ability to run something down in the open sun until it collapsed. And in Africa, it works. It works for over 1 million years. Naked apes in a warm place with no need for anything else. Then we walked north. And now the problem starts. Because a bare-skinned tropical animal in a European winter does not last one night. Not one. So somewhere between leaving the warmth and populating an ice age, somebody made the first piece of clothing. And that is the moment we want. The trouble is that hide, fur, sinew, and plant fiber all rot. The oldest actual scrap of textile anyone has ever found is around 34,000 years old. Some dyed wild flax fibers from a cave in Georgia. The oldest sewing needle with an eye in it comes from Denisova Cave in Siberia, around 50,000 years. But both of those are far too late. Those are refinements. People were wrapped in hides for a very long time before anyone thought to sew. So how do you date an invention that leaves nothing behind? You stop looking at the clothes, and you start looking at what lived in them. There are 3 kinds of lice that live on human beings. Head lice, which live in the hair on your head. Pubic lice, which we appear to have picked up from gorillas, which is a different video. And the 3rd kind, body lice. Body lice do not live on the body. They live in clothing. They spend their lives in the fabric, in the seams, and they crawl onto skin only to feed and then go back. Their claws are shaped to grip cloth fibers rather than hair. They lay their eggs in the stitching, which means body lice could not have existed before clothing existed. There was nowhere for them to be. The invention created the habitat, and then something moved into it. So in 2003, 3 researchers, Ralph Kittler, Manfred Kayser, and Mark Stoneking, did something that had not been tried before. They sequenced the DNA of head lice and body lice, measured how far the 2 populations had drifted apart, and ran the molecular clock backwards to find the moment they separated. Their answer came out at somewhere around 100,000 years ago. Later work by Melissa Toops and colleagues in 2011 widened the window, putting it somewhere between 83,000 and 170,000 years ago. And I want to be honest about how soft those numbers are. Molecular clocks have very wide error bars. The estimate has already moved once and it will move again. Nobody is claiming a year or a century. But the shape of the answer is solid. Clothing is not ancient by the standards of our species. We were naked for well over 1 million years and covered for maybe the last 1/10 of that. We dated the invention of clothing by sequencing a parasite. And it is the timing that matters. Because that window, somewhere in the range of 170,000 to 83,000 years ago, is almost exactly the window in which modern humans began leaving Africa for good. That is not a coincidence. That is the sequence. Clothing was not a comfort. It was the technology that unlocked the planet. Without it, there is no Europe, no Siberia, no walking across into the Americas. A naked ape does not cross a tundra. A dressed one does. And then, at some point, it stopped being about warmth. About 34,000 years ago, at a site called Sungir in Russia, two children were buried. Sewn onto their clothing were roughly 10,000 beads carved from mammoth ivory. Researchers have estimated the carving alone at thousands of hours of work. Nobody spends thousands of hours to stay warm. A hide does that in an afternoon. That clothing was saying something about who those children were, who their family was, and what they were worth. And it was still saying it after they were dead. Here's the part that gets assumed backwards almost every time. We tend to imagine that clothing began as modesty, and that decoration came later once we had spare time. It is the other way around. Clothing started as a tool. It became a signal, and shame was built on top of it afterwards, long after the fact, as a rule about a thing we had already been wearing for tens of thousands of years. There is a word that still carries the whole story: habit. A nun's habit is a garment. A habit is also a thing you do without thinking. Both come from the Latin habitus, which meant something like what you have and how you carry yourself. For most of the life of that word, no one saw a difference between what a person wore and what a person was. So think about what actually happened this morning. You stood in front of a wardrobe in a heated room. The temperature in that room was not a factor. It has not been a factor for your entire life. You did not choose based on cold. You chose based on who was going to see you. And if someone were to take it all away right now in front of other people, the thing you would feel would have absolutely nothing to do with the weather. So if being seen without clothes produces something in you that sits somewhere between embarrassment and fear, understand what that actually is. It is not vanity, and it is not some hang-up you invented on your own. You are carrying the last 100,000 years. We built a second skin so that we could survive the cold, and then we loaded everything else onto it: status, tribe, decency, money, worth. Whether a stranger takes you seriously in a room, that is not a defect in your character. That is the cost of an invention that worked far too well. Now imagine dropping a modern human into a European winter 100,000 years ago with nothing. You would not last the first night. You could not skin an animal fast enough. You could not scrape a hide, or work it soft, or cut sinew, or make it hold together. You would sit down in the cold at some point in the dark and simply stop, and bring one of them into your bedroom and open the wardrobe. Dozens of skins, far more than one person could ever wear. Not one of them needed for warmth today, and a person standing in front of all of it in a room that is exactly as warm as a summer afternoon, saying they have nothing to wear. For over 1,000,000 years, every single human being who ever lived met the weather with nothing but their own body. You never have, not once, not for a single day of your life.